How can we install a posthumous exhibition of Dan Flavin's work here in a space that he never saw? So I'm Steve Morse, the exhibitions coordinator and the conservator for the Dan Flavin Studio. In this exhibition, we took two categories of works, which I'll speak about later, but we applied them to the space in a way that we know there had been a precedent before by the artist himself. To get back to the point of the two types of work, what you see behind me is a diagonal of fluorescent light, of blue and green fluorescent light, that Flavin conceived in 1984 and applied to a large room in the Leo Castelli Gallery in Soho, New York. Given a large room, the thought was that he might cram all sorts of light within the work, given that much space, when in fact, which was typical of Dan, he did the paradoxical and the opposite, and he used a very light touch with one thin diagonal. And this work we would call a site situational work. That is, the work is dictated really by the site that you apply it to. We know that Flavin applied this work when he was presented with a very large wall. We know how he oriented the work in terms of the room's architecture. That is, the diagonal starts down in the lower left and progresses on its own terms up and to the right. We know that Flavin used these exact fixtures, and he used them in a way that the fixtures are using a staggered format, make their own, creates its own diagonal, so that it was Flavin's choice to utilize a diagonal, but the rate of diagonal is chosen, if you will, by the factory ready-made material. We know that Flavin considered this work expandable, and that's the key element here when we're working in this sanctuary and laboratory, is that this work will start at one point and then, given the length of the wall, will run in the serial modularity until it can go no more. This is basically a nod back to the days of Brancusi, who created an artwork known as the Endless Column, a series of identical units that had to end at some point, but did imply infinitude. The end of this work is very significant. Much like at Leo Castelli Gallery, in fact, exactly like at Leo Castelli Gallery, there's a little bit of space at the very end. This space is important to this piece because it does imply infinitude, and it does imply that the work can go on if given a larger space, and it is also contractible. That is, given a smaller space, it can be shrunk back. Given those parameters, we feel absolutely confident that Flavin would have utilized this work here in this space to this degree. The other type of work that we're talking about is what we call more individual works. I'm glad that we could come down into this corridor and take a look at what I would call a subcategory of the individual systems of works. As you can see behind me, we have a number of fixtures with a large blue lamp running along the bottom. That's 8 feet long. Above it in the center is a 2-foot lamp of varying colors. In this version right now, which we would call the blue version, a work that was dedicated to Charlotte and Jim Brooks, fellow artists and friends of Dan Flavin, you see the works in blue with the standard available colors above. You can see there pink, red, yellow. Behind me is blue, green, and filtered ultraviolet. A total of 6 individual pieces, all identical in fixture format, all different because of the differing lamp colors on top. This work will be changed to a second version of the Charlotte and Jim Brooks works, where a pink lamp is utilized and the fixtures are reduced from 6 elements to 5. Here again, this is only presentable here because there is an informed and documented precedent that Flavin had done this with the work previously. In this case, you're going to see 6 works that are considered individual works in each own right. That is, there could be a pink over blue, as you see in that end, a red over blue, or all 6 go together as a system. There are different ways that this work was mounted by the artist, that is, spaced evenly as they have been in this situation here, or sometimes, though rarely, spaced end to end to make one long line and connected work. And of course, then the color change of the lower tube to pink will augment and change the character and the feeling of this work entirely. So this is important in terms of what we're trying to do here along the lines of laboratory, that is, push the works to inform the viewing public the options that Flavin had within the systems he defined, within the systems that he found available to him, and to create a wide range of work and a wide range of emotional reactions of that work, which is entirely up to the viewer, within these very limited industrially produced systems. One of the things that I'm always drawn back to when we're working on one of these installations is, of course, the memory of Dan, because he usually enjoyed being present at the installation very much. And I remember the things he used to tell people in terms of what did the work mean, why was he doing what he was doing. And he had some very interesting things to say. The first one that comes to my recollection is, "It is what it is, and it ain't nothing else," which in terms of medium, he didn't list every piece of equipment that went into the work. He simply called it fluorescent light. He also said, "It's as plain and direct an art as I think you'll find." And what he meant by that was also tied into another phrase. It's an easy in, easy out situation. That is, viewers aren't expected to come here and stare at these things for long periods of time. That will invite the viewer to invent context that quite simply isn't there. The art is what it is. Fluorescent light placed intelligently within an architectural environment, creating this lighting situation as the artist had intended to, based upon a precedent that we know, and it ain't nothing else.